and it's really robust to country. Now, what I want to do is just show you one thing to take away from this, okay? In that often we tend to think of these effects being via the sort of inputs that the parents have to the child. So it's actually all to do with the extent to which we can buy them ballet lessons, or maybe we're doing extra reading with them, or we're sort of giving them toys which are educationally productive or useful. What this chart shows is that in terms of both cognitive development and psychological adjustment, it's none of those things which are really important. What's really important is maternal, parental and father's warmth, maternal distress, her psychological state, and the relationship between the partners. And that's true for both their cognitive development and for their psychological development, the children. Okay? So it's actually much more to do with the way that parents relate to their children. And again, we could just say, well, why don't we give them parenting lessons? But the reality is that a parent under stress, under psychological distress and experiencing depression, finds it very difficult to use whatever they're being taught in the parenting lesson in everyday life, because they're still under the stress, they're still finding it very difficult, and it's going to be hard for them to change the way that they're reacting. So we need to put this problem into a much broader context. Now, I won't try to take you through that. So, let's then turn to the policy response. How am I doing for time? Well, 10 minutes left. Great. Take a quick sip of water. So, what should our policy response be? I'm not going to try to give you chapter and verse about this, because of course there's many, many, many things that we could talk about. And hopefully this is something that you'll be talking about in a few minutes. And I promise to finish it soon as I can. So the policy response, I've just got a couple of quotes here. One from Josef Bjarnason, who's a social policy analyst who's very well known. If the race is already halfway run even before children begin school, then we clearly need to examine what happens in the earliest years. This is one from Jim Heckman, who actually came to Ireland quite a lot. Like it or not, the most important mental behavioural patterns, once established, are difficult to change once children enter school. Now, I don't want to put all of the weight on early years. We can intervene later. In fact, we have, in a sense, an onus to try to intervene later to prevent poorer outcomes. Nonetheless, the later you leave your response, the more difficult it is to change the outcome and the more expensive it becomes, the more resources you have to throw at the problem. So that would suggest intervene early, be preventative, make sure that you try to stop the consequences happening and don't just firefight and respond and try to mop up afterwards. So, in terms of interventions with childhood, what works? Clearly, from what I've just told you, the living standards of households matter, the long-term living standards of households. So maintaining the living standards of families with young children is imperative. This talks about having basic incomes for families where there's security of income for families, so they are both have a living standard which is comparable to the society in which they live, and also that they have some security in that living standard over time. They're not experiencing psychological distress. Upstream interventions are going to be more effective than downstream amelioration. Alright, so intervene early to change the circumstances rather than intervening later to mop up the consequences of the outcome. Thirdly, services are often more effective than cash. Okay? So just giving families cash doesn't necessarily provide you the answers if prior to that they're already experiencing problems. So sometimes we can have better outcomes by having systems which intervene to help families to have lifestyles and to have the relationships in the family and have a position in society which helps them to be healthier and to have better well-being. This is particularly something that has been they've got wise to in Scandinavia and into Northern Europe, where universal services have been a very effective part of a policy response that leads to greater equality in terms of outcomes amongst families, particularly young children. Fourthly, early assessment of need and preventative response is better than firefighting after it's happened. So that means having surveillance systems and having resources available to families so that families can look for help and they have advocates who help them find those resources. And I'm not talking about cash, I'm talking about the resources in terms of professionals, the resources in terms of being able to help people to find the advice that they need, these types of things. Last thing, preschool education is particularly important, and I want to share some evidence about preschool education. Now I'm going to skip that part and just talk about the fact that we tend to think of preschool education as being really just about childcare. It's about allowing parents to go out to work. And of course, as part of a general policy response where we want to maximise the number of people working, and where we want parents to be able to work and to go out into the labour market, that has its place. But we should also think about early education as education, not just childcare. It's about giving children a good start in life, and it's about giving them the skills and the abilities that we want them to be able to use into the future. And it's really important for children coming from deprived backgrounds who often have deficits. Because of some of the processes that I've talked about, it can be really, really important for them. And I've got some education here. I've got some slides here that show you how some of the UK studies that have looked at these issues and then tried to intervene, how they found that the interventions themselves worked and the benefits they had. There were 5 particular areas that were particularly important for effective preschool education. One was the quality of the adult-child interaction. Okay? So these were having well-skilled, qualified people working in the preschool environment who knew what they were doing. They knew what they were trying to achieve, they knew the objectives, and they had the skills to actually implement it. So they had a knowledge and understanding of the curriculum about what they were trying to do. They knew about young children, they knew about how they learned. These adults could then help children in resolving conflicts. They could teach children how to work and how to deal interpersonally with other children, with other adults, which is often a deficit that deprived kids have because of the processes I've already talked about. Lastly, helping parents to support children's learning at home is an important part of what these preschool education courses manage to achieve. I'm not going to try to give you too much data about this, okay, but I just wanted to show you this slide, which I think is really important. This is looking at the impact of pre- and primary school conditions on the maths outcomes of these children within this study. What we've got here are schools, so the different bars represent schools of low, medium, high effectiveness, right? So these are primary schools essentially, some of which are better than others. But we also have preschool education where that can be both low, medium, and high effectiveness, so better preschools compared to worse preschools. And the way to look at this is that as the school effectiveness rises, okay, so does the maths scores of the kids. The kids do better when they're in good primary schools. But look at this. When the children are in very high effectiveness preschools, even when the schools themselves are low, the primary schools themselves are low in effectiveness, the kids still do better. In fact, they're very equal in terms of their outcomes. The preschool education, in some sense, inoculates the children against poor primary schools. That strikes me as a really good investment. That tells you that the early life environment is really important in terms of giving kids the human capital that they need, the skills, the abilities to relate to others, the ability to learn, that they can then apply when they get into primary schools, even when those primary schools are worse. Okay? So that gives you good evidence about this. This comes from a large national study of preschools. What this tells you, in a sense, this next slide, is that the returns to high-quality preschool education are true in terms of things other than just their academic ability. So, in terms of outcomes like self-regulation and pro-social behaviours, which are just as key to being a good student and getting good outcomes as being very bright and able, these things improve dramatically when we have high quality preschool education compared to low and medium quality preschool education. So the quality of preschool education really matters. It's not just childcare. it's education. So fund it appropriately. Get the right quality of people to teach it. Make sure that you monitor it, and that they know they're being monitored, and that there's teeth in the policy response and in the surveillance response when they don't do it appropriately. That's really important. Evidence really shows it. I'm not going to go there. I'm going to just kind of talk about one of the policy responses that I'd like you to take away from this, because I know that we're going to want to finish as quickly as I can. This was the development of children's centres by the UK government in the Blair administrations. This was shown to be a very effective intervention, because what they did, and what the British government did, it wasn't just Labour, was they recognised that having an environment, a children's centre, where parents could come with their children and there were services available to them, but more than that, there was an advocate for them who could link them to lots of services which were available outside the centre. These were really, really effective. They were studied using national, like Ted Mellish and the Institute of Education in London, did a national study using a large sample of children here. And what they found was the benefits of 5 years for the children were considerable. Better social behaviours, more cooperation, sharing and empathy. Better social regulation amongst the children. The parental risk indexes went down, so the parents were less likely to adopt risky behaviours. There was less child obesity, better general health. For parents themselves, what we found was lower worklessness, and they were better parents as well. Okay? This is from a child centre which wasn't necessarily increasing the incomes of these parents, but it was helping them to access services and supports that allowed them to be better parents and to do better things. A very important intervention. So, you please know that's my final slide. And it really is just one of a quote that is in a report by Graham Allen and Ian Duncan Smith from 2010, which I just think sums up this approach really nicely. You probably, anybody who's seen me talk on these issues before, probably seen this as well. They say, and you've got to remember here that Graham Allen comes from the Labour Party, and Ian Duncan Smith comes from the Conservatives. He's a very conservative. Nonetheless, they wrote a report together, and they could agree on the main conclusions, which suggests to me that these are not party political conclusions. They say, if people keep falling off a cliff, don't worry about where you put the ants at the bottom. Build a fence at the top and stop them falling off in the first place. That would seem like a very sensible approach to take in a policy response. So, sorry about the whirlwind presentation, but thank you very much indeed.